Whenever deleted scenes from a film are released, it is quite common to see fans say that the scenes should have been kept in the movie. Of course, it's quite natural. As fans, we always want more. But sometimes it's not just a case of wanting to see more of the characters we love. Sometimes the deleted scenes really did seem to bring something to the story that would have made it better. In my opinion, this was the case with the first Thor movie directed by Kenneth Branagh, and I'm going to try and explain why in this video. So of course I'll start right away with a disclaimer. This is just me giving my opinion as a viewer. I do not claim to know better than Kenneth Branagh how to make movies, and I do not know what behind-the-scenes constraints he might have had and might have been responding to when he decided to cut these scenes. And also, spoiler warning, this video will include spoilers for Thor and for Thor: The Dark World. So the Blu-ray release of Thor includes many deleted scenes. I will not cover all of them, as I think some of them were indeed not really necessary, even when they would have been fun additions. For example, the extended version of Thor and Selvig's drinking contest. That was fun, but it was not necessary. On the other hand, I think a number of the scenes that were deleted really would have added some valuable elements, and I would even argue that removing them damaged the film to a certain extent by making it less clear. This is especially true when it comes to clarifying the very complex motivations of its main villain, Loki. I have selected 3 scenes, and I will have a look at them chronologically. And just before I start, I'm currently doing a lot of video essays about Loki, so if you like that type of content, don't forget to like and subscribe, and maybe check out my older videos as well. So I'll start with a long scene and one of the most important ones, in my opinion, the Thor-Loki pre-coronation talk.
Nervous, brother?
Have you ever known me to be nervous?
Well, there was the time in Nornheim.
That was not nerves, brother. That was the rage of battle.
Ah, I see.
How else could I have fought my way through 100 warriors and pulled us out alive?
As I recall, I was the one who veiled us in smoke to ease our escape.
Yes. Some do battle, others just do tricks. Loki. Now that was just a waste of good wine.
Oh, it's just a bit of fun. Right, my friend? Ooh, nice feathers.
You don't really want to start this again, do you, Cal?
I was being sincere.
You are incapable of sincerity.
Am I?
Yes.
I've looked forward to this day as long as you have. You're my brother and my friend. And sometimes I'm envious. But never doubt that I love you.
Thank you.
Now give us a kiss.
Stop it.
This scene from Thor is actually a fan favourite, even though it's not in the movie, which in itself is maybe enough to say already that they shouldn't have cut it. This scene clarified several things about Thor and Loki's relationship before Thor was banished and before Loki found out about his true origins. In this scene we can see that Loki can be mischievous, and it's in fact arguably the only scene that really shows this side of Loki. Other than this, we actually almost never see Loki smile in this film. The first mischievous smile in the final version comes during his conversation with Luffy, very, very late into the movie. 1 hour, 9 minutes and 30 seconds to be exact. The problem is, this film posits that Loki is the god of mischief, so the idea is presumably that although he has always had that mischievous streak in him, he never turned into an outright villain until he snapped as a result of the soul-crushing revelation that he was adopted and also a frost giant. But since that one and only scene that really showed mischievous Loki has been removed, we never really saw that progression from mischief to villainy. And he seems to go directly to outright villainy without really any clear progression. And I think a lot of the discourse that has been written about Loki, whether he's good or bad or really a villain or not really a villain, yes, it's why the character is so fascinating, but some of it also comes from maybe a lack of definition of his previous personality in the first Thor movie, before the whole developments of Thor. In the final version, all we have is a little comment by Fandral saying,
Loki's always been one for mischief, but you're talking about something else entirely.
I think it's a case where the principle of show, don't tell would have been much more effective, to show Loki being actually mischievous rather than Fandral saying it to us. Because mischief is not the same as villainy. Mischief is supposed to be light and fun.
Oh, it's just a bit of fun. Right, my friend?
It can be mean, it can also be petty, but it's not villainy. Villainy is something more serious and more heavy and more tragic as well. I also really love that Loki said,
You're my brother and my friend. And sometimes I'm envious. But never doubt that I love you.
once you have seen the film, you know that while he was saying that, Loki was already planning to ruin Thor's coronation by letting Frost Giant into Asgard. So this statement is retrospectively very powerful. It almost feels like an apology for what he's about to do. And it's also, in a way, ironically, just the plain truth for once. I mean, Loki's not lying this time. He's jealous of Thor. He's not revealing him all the information, but at the same time, what he's telling him is true, that he hates him in a way because he's jealous, but he also loves him. So it was a beautiful line because it was both Loki being duplicitous, but also just telling the plain truth for once. There were other passages of this scene that I would have kept though, because in addition to establishing Loki's ambivalent feelings towards Thor, they also shed light on the fact that Thor himself had the responsibility in the toxic aspects of their relationship. Because yes, we see that Loki can be quite petty and cruel when he terrifies the manservant for laughing at him, but Thor is no better. He scolds Loki, but not for scaring the manservant. He scolds him for wasting good wine.
Now that was just a waste of good wine.
Showing that he doesn't care much about the manservant's feeling, no more than Loki does. And even more importantly, that scene also showed how Thor kept casually throwing microaggressions at Loki and was completely oblivious to how much he was hurting him. He belittles Loki's achievements and takes credit for them instead. Loki has to remind him that he was the one who saved them all with a cloud of smoke, only then to be told,
Some do battle, others just do tricks.
It established one crucial point about Loki and how he was viewed in Asgard, and that was one of the things that I analysed in the Daggers video. Because his talent was magic, he was not respected by the others who conformed to the ideals of Asgard's warrior culture more. Without this scene, you can kind of draw this conclusion by yourself, but it's almost relegated to a headcanon. There's not much in the film that actually supports the theory that he is despised for his magic. So it was a great scene because it really showed the complexity of their relationship. You can see that they do have a complicity there, laughing together. There's even a bit of banter about their respective helmets. But you can also feel the tension, and you can see how blind Thor is being to Loki's feelings, which in turn makes it more believable when he completely falls for Loki's bullshit during that scene.
Father is dead. What?
And when he goes all surprised Pikachu at the end, when he realizes that Loki actually harbored so much resentment against him.
Why have you done this?
The one little thing I would probably have removed was Thor's "you are incapable of sincerity." Because precisely, if you establish from the start that Thor knows Loki to be duplicitous and a very good liar, then it's kind of hard to understand why he doesn't anticipate what happens next at all. So maybe I wouldn't have kept all of that scene, but I feel like having a scene that established what their relationship was like as adults before the various big disruptive events that happened was something that was sorely missing from the film in its final version. So I'm not saying that you always have to over-explain everything. Sometimes it can be nice to leave a few things in the subtexts, but sometimes it's also nice to establish a number of essential things before you start developing the story. And personally, I felt that too much was left in the subtext about that relationship, which was so essential to the whole plot. Number 2, Loki manipulates Thor into going to Jotunheim.
unwise to be in my company right now, brother.
You said I was wise.
This was to be my day of triumph.
It'll come in time. If it's any consolation, I think you're right. About the Frost Giants, about Laufey, about everything. If they found a way to penetrate Asgard's defenses once, who's to say they won't try again? Next time with an army.
Exactly.
There's nothing you can do without defying Father.
Yes, there is.
No, stop. I know that. Look, stop right there.
It's the only way to ensure the safety of our borders.
Thor, it's madness.
Madness? What sort of madness?
It's nothing. Thor was merely making a jest.
The safety of our realm is no jest. We're going to Jotunheim.
What?
Thor, of all the laws of Asgard, this is the one you must not break.
This isn't like a journey to Earth, where you summon a little lightning and thunder and the mortals worship you as a god. This is Jotunheim.
If the Frost Giants don't kill you, your father will.
My father fought his way into Jotunheim, defeated their armies, and took their casket. We would just be looking for answers.
It is forbidden.
My friends, have you forgotten all that we have done together? Who brought you into the sweet embrace of the most exotic maidens in all of Yggdrasil?
You helped a little.
And who led you into the most glorious of battles?
You did.
And to delicacies so succulent you thought you died and gone to Valhalla.
You did.
Yes. And who proved wrong all who scoffed at the idea that a young maiden could be one of the fiercest warriors this realm has ever known?
I did.
True, but I supported you. My friends, trust me now. We must do this. You're not going to let my brother and me take all the glory, are you?
What?
But you are coming with me, aren't you?
Yes, of course. I won't let my brother march into Jotunheim alone.
And I.
And I.
And I. The Warriors Three fight together.
If we're lucky.
I have less to say about this scene, but I still think it should have been kept. It wasn't deleted altogether, but this is a longer version of that scene with different editing and maybe even different takes, I'm not sure. Then there was yet another part of that scene that showed them departing for Jotunheim, but I haven't included that one because while it was a nice scene, I don't think it was very essential. It didn't really bring anything new to the story. For me, the one little passage that really should have been left in was Loki's response when Thor suggested that he wanted him to come with them. It was yet another scene that showed how complex Loki's attitude to Thor really was. Because throughout that scene, what we see is actually Loki using reverse psychology on Thor to manipulate him into making a big mistake. And yet the emotion he feels and the beaming smile he gives Thor when Thor suggests that he accompany him to Jotunheim seems genuine. He knows he intends to frame Thor and later warn the guards before they leave. He has to pretend to go along, but you can also tell there's real joy in being included in the group. So it was a great moment because of that ambiguity, but also it added something to the story because it showed that Loki was used to being excluded from the group. Again, something that you can maybe guess from the subtext, but it's not really developed at any point. So I feel that keeping these extra few seconds could have emphasized even more the complexity of the relationship between Loki on one side and Thor and his friends on the other side. Number 3. Loki is offered the throne by Frigga.
I asked him to be honest with you from the beginning. There should be no secrets in a family.
So why did he lie?
He kept the truth from you so that you would never feel different. You are our son, Loki, and we your family. You must know that. You can speak to him. He can see and hear us even now.
How long will it last?
I don't know. This time it's different. We were unprepared.
I'll never get used to seeing him like this. The most powerful being in the 9 realms, lying helpless, until his body is restored.
But he's put it off for so long now that I fear. You're a good son. We mustn't lose hope that your father will return to us. And your brother.
What hope is there for Thor?
There's always a purpose to everything your father does. Thor may yet find a way home.
Thor is banished. The line of succession falls to you.
Until Odin awakens, Asgard is yours. Make your father proud. My king.
Again, this is a scene that wasn't deleted altogether, but several passages were cut, and its chronological position in the narrative was also changed, which really altered its meaning. The long version of that scene brought at least 2 important elements. First, giving Frigga more screen time and establishing more clearly that Loki and Frigga had a very close relationship. And I think it really makes sense to show Loki and Frigga having a conversation about the huge revelation that Loki has just gotten from Odin. I also like the fact that the longer version shows that Frigga had a different opinion from Odin's. And she's not just blindly following him, even though in the end she kind of agreed to follow him, but she did not agree with him. In fact, I'm focusing on Loki in this video, but the film really did Frigga dirty by removing or partly cutting several of her scenes. There was another scene in particular that I think should have been kept, in which she got very angry at Odin for banishing Thor. I think it was very important to flesh out Frigga's character, because there's obviously a dynamic in that family which is very much Odin and Thor on one side and Frigga and Loki on the other side. And her role as a kind of counterpower to Odin was interesting. Kenneth Branagh only has nice things to say about René Russo and her portrayal of Frigga, but he never really gives any convincing explanation as to why they removed so many of her scenes, apart from the fact that they needed to make the movie shorter. But he actually seems to be regretting that he had to remove these scenes. And I actually think that the choice to remove most of Frigga's scenes not only hurt the first movie, but also the second Thor movie, The Dark World, because suddenly her death was supposed to be a huge thing, but in reality they had barely developed her character at all, so we had only a few crumbs to rely on, really. So in the end they only made her feel important when they decided to fridge her to further Thor and Loki's development, which is really a shame. Also, it's not just the relationship with Frigga that is fleshed out in this longer version of the scene, but also how much Loki cares about Odin. He seems both angry and concerned about him. You can see he has tears in his eyes in most of that scene, and his question, how long will it last? In this version, it seems to be more about his need to talk to his father again than just checking how long he can remain king. The second very important thing that this longer version of the scene did was to establish clearly that Loki did not expect to become king right away, but that once this opportunity was given to him, he suddenly wanted it very badly. In the final version, this scene is much shorter, but it was also moved so that it comes after the scene that shows Loki already on the throne. So this longer version of the scene really makes a huge difference. We see that he doesn't seize the throne, he's offered the throne with Frigga's blessing. We actually see that Loki is shocked to be offered the position of king at first. When he takes the spear, he seems to see it as a burden at first. The way he manipulates it, it looks very heavy. But you can see the change in his expression and how he's seduced by the idea. Also, I'm sorry, but there's really no good excuse for having this amazing shot of Loki's face and not including it in the film. That's just criminal. So with this shorter version of the scene and the difference in the chronological order, I'm not sure that casual viewers necessarily realize while they're watching that it wasn't Loki's initial plan to seize the throne. I'm honestly not sure I did on first viewing. Yet, it clearly couldn't have been his plan if you watch the movie carefully, and if you think about the chain of events. Loki's plan was only to disrupt the ceremony and probably to expose Thor as someone who was unfit to rule, but he had not planned for things to go so far. Loki's expression of horror when Thor gets banished by Odin seems very genuine. He's not play-acting in that scene. We do not know exactly what Loki was really trying to achieve by introducing Frost giants into Asgard during Thor's coronation. And maybe Loki himself did not even really know. Maybe he was just creating chaos. He's the god of mischief. That's his purpose. But my guess would be that he was simply hoping to delay Thor's coronation, maybe in the hope that it would give him time to prove himself to Odin, to show that he could be a better ruler. But he couldn't have been planning to seize the throne for himself in the immediate future, simply because he could not have anticipated that Odin would fall into the Odin sleep right away, and that the throne would be vacant. It's really an unexpected development that this happens because of the emotional shock that Odin has to face when he reveals to Loki that he was a frost giant. What happens to Loki in this film is in many ways a tragedy. He's not a bad person. He has a mean streak maybe, but he's not a bad person and he's capable. But he has one tragic flaw, which is his jealousy. And because of that, he sets in motion things which he had never intended to set in motion. And for me, the sudden transition to Loki sitting on the throne does not really communicate this well. Even the way the visuals frame Loki as a scheming villain in this scene, it really seems to imply that it had been his plan all along. It really makes him look like an evil mastermind who's like, I had you all fooled. And this is just not what happened in the film, not even in the final version. Now I want to finish by discussing the question of why those scenes were cut. A popular theory is that the scenes were cut because they wanted to make Loki less sympathetic. There is this whole idea that Marvel hates Loki for some reason. I think it was probably true that they never anticipated how popular the character would be, and you can kind of tell by looking at the Blu-ray, the extras have almost nothing on Loki. But I really don't believe in this kind of conspiracy against Loki. I don't believe that's very credible. Firstly, I think they did want to make Loki sympathetic. Kenneth Branagh cast Tom Hiddleston in this role for a reason, and there were still many scenes, in particular the scene of Odin's confession, that made you feel really bad for Loki. So they probably didn't expect audiences to love him as much as they did, but clearly they never meant to make him a one-dimensional villain that you didn't care about. And secondly, when you actually look at those scenes, I don't really agree that they made Loki more sympathetic. They made his motivations clearer, yes, but they clearly did not exonerate him at all. On the contrary, some aspects of these scenes made him appear even more manipulative and untrustworthy. Take the pre-coronation scene, for example. Fans often love it because it depicts an intimate moment between the two brothers, and you can feel the love between them, that you can feel it's real. But still, there's so much more going on in this scene than just showing two brothers who love each other. If this had been left in first, adult Loki's introduction in the movie would have been this. This is a very villain-like introduction. It was also an interesting one because the connection between Loki and the idea of a shadow is one that is often made. I won't develop this here because I devoted another short video to this question. You can check it out here. Besides, another thing that's very important to remember is that this scene also shows Loki being a horrible person. He's telling Thor these nice things about how he looks like a king. He's pretending to give him comfort and support, but he's already plotting to ruin his coronation ceremony by introducing frost giants into Asgard. I mean, even with that deleted scene added, it wouldn't have changed that. So if anything, it makes him look even more like a villain, who can manipulate his brother and appear warm and supportive when he's plotting to expose him to everyone as a person who's unfit to rule. And the same thing is true about the scene in which Loki convinces Thor to go to Jotunheim. What we see here is Loki using reverse psychology on Thor, manipulating him into making a big mistake so that Odin would lose trust in him. So this isn't really Loki being nice, on the contrary, he's being quite horrible. But it's true that to a certain extent it does make you sympathize with him a little more, because you see how happy he is to come with them, and then you understand his jealousy a little better. So, in terms of explanations, the Thor Blu-ray actually has a commentary of all the deleted scenes by Kenneth Branagh, but I was never really convinced by his explanations as to why he had deleted the scenes. Sometimes he claimed it did not work, but on several occasions I think they really did work and actually would have made the film much better. And in any case, there was only one explanation that just kept coming back. He needed to make the film shorter. He mentions time and time again the need to be economic and time constrictions. He even says in the deleted scene that shows Selvig getting hurt and Thor healing him, and this is a direct quote, "In the end, time crushed us, and the dramatic demands just kept telling us to be a little briefer, a little leaner." So it's hard to know because I don't have any inside information on what happened behind the scenes, but I wouldn't be surprised if he had been asked to not go over the 2-hour mark, for example, and maybe he was working with very strong constraints in that department. When talking about the pre-coronation scene, he said he wanted to get sooner to a more punchy sense of the occasion rather than going behind the scenes to see the characters. I'm not sure it's very convincing. I think he just needed to cut some scenes because he needed the film to be shorter. And another motivation was probably also to avoid giving away too much information to the viewer too quickly. The pre-coronation exchange between Thor and Loki made it pretty obvious that Loki was harboring some resentment towards Thor and that he was probably up to something.
But if you don't mind me saying, it was pretty obvious.
Without this scene, Loki's introduction is only a close-up on his face while Odin is talking about Thor being his firstborn and heir. In a way, it also accomplishes the same thing, but it is a little less obvious. Similarly, not showing the scene in which Loki is given Odin's spear, Gungnir, means that seeing him on the throne is more of a surprise. And in this case, Kenneth Branagh clearly explained that this was the intention. He said they thought it would serve the story better to show Loki on the throne as a surprise, I quote, "to throw the characters and the audience off balance." So I think there were some reasons why they cut these scenes, and the decisions were probably driven by a desire to make the film shorter and to make some developments more surprising. But in the end, I don't think it really worked. And while I don't think it was the intention to make Loki less sympathetic, I do think that the result was to sometimes make his motivations and the complexity of the character less understandable. And I feel the argument of making things more surprising wasn't really good, because let's face it, Loki's scheming against Thor was not a very surprising development anyway.
But if you don't mind me saying, it was pretty obvious.
Especially if you know anything about the mythology and the comics. And in my opinion, this little surprise was not worth removing some scenes that were really interesting for character development. And really, this is not just me being a Loki fan who always wants more Loki, because there are other examples where I actually do think they were right to cut some scenes in other movies. In The Dark World, for example, we saw some footage of Loki going feral in his cell after Frigga's death and screaming in agony after destroying all the furniture. And yes, I understand the frustration of Loki fans because those scenes were filmed and they would have been very powerful and a rare opportunity to see Loki completely losing it, something that we very rarely see since he's so controlled and he always hides his feelings behind the facade. But in this case, and I know this might be a bit controversial for other Loki fans, I do think they were right to cut the scene because it would have diminished the impact of a later scene, which is one of my absolute favorite moments with Loki and Thor, which is the moment when Thor sees through Loki's illusion and makes him dispel it, only to reveal his true physical and mental state. And really, I think that the gut punch you get from this moment, it really works because you haven't seen Loki trashing the furniture before. So in this case, it works so well that I think it was worth sacrificing these other scenes to heighten the power of this one. In the same way, I like the deleted scene that shows Loki fantasizing about being king and lifting Mjolnir, but it doesn't really bring anything essential to the story. We already know that this is what Loki has in his head. It just gives a more embodied idea of this, but it's something we already know, so there's no new information in that scene. Whereas I don't think the same can be said about the Thor deleted scenes that I mentioned. I truly think that the film would have been better if it had been longer, mostly because it was really worth spending a few extra minutes on fleshing out Loki's character and making his motivations clearer. So do you agree with me that keeping these scenes would have made the film better? Do you have any other ideas as to why they were cut? Let me know in the comments and I'll see you next time. Bye bye!